Cruel neighbor Harasses. Elderly woman over her garden. Keanu Reeves teaches him a lesson. Where are you watching this video from? Please comment and let us know. Also, don't forget to like the video and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. The sun cast a golden glow over Maplewood Lane, a quiet suburban neighborhood where life unfolded at an easy pace. The houses stood in neat rows, each adorned with well-kept lawns, colorful flower beds, and winding stone paths leading up to welcoming front doors. Birds chirped from the trees, and a soft breeze carried the scent of freshly mowed grass and blooming roses. Evelyn's house was the most charming of all. A retired schoolteacher in her late 70s, she had poured her heart into her garden. Her backyard was a kaleidoscope of colors: lavender, daisies, and bright wildflowers spilled over onto the edges of her property, creeping past the white picket fence and onto the neighboring yard. Unfortunately, that yard belonged to Mr. Thompson, a retired accountant in his 60s. Mr. Thompson was known for his strict routine, and even stricter opinions about property lines. His lawn was a masterpiece of symmetry. Every blade of grass trimmed to an exact height, every bush pruned with precision. He considered Evelyn's wildflower invasion a personal affront, an insult to his carefully maintained order. One morning, just as Evelyn was watering her daisies, Mr. Thompson stomped across the property line, his face flushed with irritation. "Mrs. Evelyn," he grumbled, pointing at the rebellious blooms encroaching on his pristine lawn, "your flowers are trespassing again." Evelyn looked up from her watering can and smiled. "Oh, Mr. Thompson, nature doesn't follow property lines. Besides, don't they add a little charm to your yard?" Mr. Thompson folded his arms. "Charm, I call it chaos." As the two neighbors stood in their familiar standoff, a black motorcycle roared down the street and pulled up near Evelyn's house. The rider removed his helmet, revealing tousled dark hair and an unmistakably familiar face. Keanu Reeves had been renting a house on Maplewood Lane while working on a nearby film project. Though he was a Hollywood star, he carried himself with a quiet humility that made him fit right in. He had taken a liking to Evelyn's garden, often stopping by to admire the flowers or chat about life. Seeing the tension between the two neighbors, Keanu approached with a relaxed smile. "Good morning, Evelyn. Mr. Thompson," he greeted, nodding at them both. Evelyn beamed. "Keanu, dear. Lovely to see you." Mr. Thompson, caught off guard by the celebrity's presence, cleared his throat and muttered, "Morning." Keanu glanced at the wildflowers, between their yards and then back at the two neighbors. He could sense the unspoken battle between order and nature, between strict boundaries and gentle chaos. "You know," Keanu said thoughtfully, "there's something poetic about how these flowers grow where they please. Maybe they're just trying to bring a little beauty to both sides." Evelyn grinned, while Mr. Thompson huffed but didn't immediately object. And so, in the heart of their quiet neighborhood, an unexpected friendship was about to bloom. For the next few days, Mr. Thompson's grumbling turned into outright hostility. He seemed to take personal offense at Evelyn's refusal to cut back her garden, treating the wildflowers as an attack on his sense of order. One afternoon, as Evelyn gently pruned her roses, she heard his voice booming from across the yard. "Mrs. Evelyn, how many times do I have to tell you? These weeds are invading my property." Evelyn turned slowly, her warm eyes meeting his cold glare. "They're not weeds, Mr. Thompson. They're wildflowers, nature's way of brightening the world. They're a nuisance," he snapped. "I'm warning you, if you don't take care of it, I'll have to report this to the homeowners association." Evelyn sighed, brushing the dirt from her gloves. "You do what you think is best, Mr. Thompson." The next morning, she woke early to tend to her plants, only to find devastation. A section of her flower bed had been ruthlessly uprooted, Lavender and daisies lay discarded on the pavement, their delicate petals crushed under careless hands. The soil was overturned, the once thriving corner of her garden reduced to chaos. Evelyn felt her heart tighten. She knelt beside the ruined flowers, running her fingers over the broken stems. A quiet sadness filled her, but she didn't get angry. Instead, she picked up the scattered plants and began replanting them, humming softly to herself as she worked. Keanu had seen everything. He had been jogging past just as Mr. Thompson, red-faced and muttering, stomped back into his house after his act of destruction. Slowing his pace, Keanu watched as Evelyn, heartbreak evident in her posture, calmly restored what she could. He exhaled sharply, shaking his head. This wasn't just about a few flowers, it was about kindness, about respect, about the way people treated one another. And if there was one thing Keanu Reeves couldn't stand, it was cruelty. As he watched Evelyn's quiet resilience, a plan began to form in his mind. If Mr. Thompson wanted a battle over flowers, Keanu would fight back, just not in the way Thompson expected. The next morning, as the sun peeked over the rooftops, Keanu slowed his jog as he reached Evelyn's house. He found her kneeling by her flower bed, gently pressing a young lavender plant into the soil. The quiet determination in her movements struck him. She wasn't just gardening. She was healing. "Good morning, Evelyn," Keanu said, stepping onto the pathway. Evelyn looked up, her face brightening. "Keanu, dear, out for your morning run?" He nodded, then crouched beside her. "I saw what happened yesterday." His voice was gentle, but there was a hint of steel beneath it. Evelyn sighed, patting the dirt around the plant. "Oh, don't mind Mr. Thompson. He's been that way for years. My husband, Henry, used to say some people guard their hearts the same way. They guard their lawns, too afraid to let anything unexpected grow." Keanu smiled at the wisdom in her words. "Henry sounds like a good man." Evelyn's eyes softened. "He was. We built this garden together, you know. Every flower, every vine, it was our little sanctuary." She glanced at the broken remnants of her wildflowers. "It's all I have left of him now." Keanu felt a pang in his chest. This wasn't just a hobby for Evelyn, it was a living memory. A connection to the love she had lost. And Mr. Thompson had trampled all over it. Keanu exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Evelyn, if you don't mind, I'd like to help." Evelyn tilted her head. "Oh, sweetheart, I appreciate that, but you don't need to." "I want to," Keanu interrupted gently. "And I have an idea." The next day, while Evelyn was out running errands, Keanu made a few calls. By that afternoon, a professional landscaper arrived, surveying the garden with a knowing smile. "You want it restored?" the landscaper asked. Keanu nodded. "Not just restored. I want it to be even better than before." And so they got to work. Fresh wildflowers were planted along the edges, blending harmoniously into Evelyn's existing garden. A small stone pathway was added, leading to a cozy wooden bench beneath the old oak tree. Vines were carefully trained to wrap around the trellis, creating a natural canopy of green. By the time the sun dipped below the horizon, Evelyn's sanctuary was reborn, vibrant, full of life, and even more beautiful than before. But Keanu wasn't done yet. That evening, under the glow of the porch light, he scribbled a short note and placed it on Mr. Thompson's doorstep. "I'd like to talk things over peacefully. Meet me in Evelyn's garden tomorrow morning. Keanu." Then, with a satisfied nod, he walked back to his house, hoping that Mr. Thompson would accept the invitation and maybe, just maybe, let something new take root in his heart. The next morning, Mr. Thompson stood at his kitchen window, sipping his usual black coffee. His gaze drifted toward Evelyn's yard, expecting to see the usual tangle of overgrown wildflowers creeping onto his lawn. Instead, he froze. The garden was breathtaking. The unruly plants had been tamed into a natural harmony, spilling gracefully over a newly laid stone path. A wooden bench sat under the old oak tree, inviting and peaceful. Fresh lavender swayed gently in the morning breeze, their scent carried toward his window. It wasn't chaos anymore. It was art. Thompson frowned, setting down his coffee. This had to be Keanu's doing. That Hollywood guy, always too relaxed, too friendly. And now he was meddling. His eyes flickered to the note still sitting on his kitchen table. He had scoffed when he first read it, tossing it aside. But now, as he stared at the transformed garden, a flicker of curiosity nagged at him. With a sigh, he grabbed his jacket and stepped outside. Keanu was sitting on Evelyn's new bench, sipping tea with her when Thompson approached. "I see you got your way," Thompson muttered, his arms crossed. Keanu gave him an easy smile. "Not really." "Evelyn did." Thompson grunted but said nothing. Keanu patted the bench beside him. "Take a seat." Thompson hesitated, then reluctantly sat at the edge, his posture stiff. He glanced around the garden, then at Evelyn, who was quietly tending to a patch of violets, as if she had already forgiven him without needing an apology. Keanu set his cup down. "Look, man, I get it. You like order. You like things just the way you want them." Thompson didn't argue. "But life's too short to worry about a few flowers, man," Keanu continued. "You spend all this time trying to control everything. But what does it really get you? Frustration? Isolation?" He gestured toward Evelyn, who was humming softly as she worked. Meanwhile, Evelyn's out here making something beautiful, sharing it with the world. Thompson swallowed, his gaze lowering. I don't like things getting out of control," he admitted. His voice was quieter now, the anger drained from it. Keanu nodded. "I get that. But kindness, respect? That goes further than hostility ever will." A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Thompson let out a breath, his shoulders slumping. He turned toward Evelyn. I'm sorry," he muttered, "for what I did to your flowers." Evelyn looked up, a gentle smile on her face. "Oh, Mr. Thompson, flowers grow back. People do too." Thompson nodded, something shifting inside him. He wasn't sure what, but for the first time in years he didn't feel so alone. The following week, the neighborhood witnessed something truly unexpected. Mr. Thompson kneeling in Evelyn's garden, carefully pulling out weeds. Not her wildflowers, but actual weeds. His usual scowl had softened, replaced with quiet concentration. Evelyn watched from her porch, a knowing smile on her lips. "Careful with that one, Mr. Thompson. That's chamomile, not a weed." Thompson huffed but adjusted his grip. "Right, chamomile." He worked in silence for a moment, then glanced at her. "I could, help out once in a while. Keep things looking nice." Evelyn's smile widened. "I'd like that." As the days passed, something remarkable happened. The neighborhood, once indifferent to Evelyn's garden, began to see it differently. Children stopped to admire the new stone path, their tiny fingers brushing over the lavender. Couples walking their dogs lingered near the bench, soaking in the peaceful atmosphere. Even the strictest homeowners started complimenting the blend of colors. The way nature and care had merged into something truly special. It became a symbol not just of beauty, but of harmony. And just like that, the old battle between order and chaos faded. Mr. Thompson still kept his lawn meticulously trimmed, but now, along its edges, wildflowers thrived. A quiet compromise, an unspoken truce. One morning, Evelyn stepped outside to find something unexpected on the bench. Beneath the oak tree, a small note folded neatly. "Looks like the garden didn't just change a yard, it changed a few hearts too. Take care of it. I'll see you around. Keanu. Evelyn chuckled softly, glancing down the street. Keanu's house was empty. He had left just as quietly as he had arrived. Without fanfare. Without recognition. But his presence lingered in the laughter of neighbors admiring the flowers, in the warmth of old wounds healing, and in the way even the grumpiest man on the block now knelt in a garden, carefully tending to something that had once annoyed him. Evelyn tucked the note into her pocket and picked up her watering can. The flowers had taken root, and so had kindness.